Reactor online. Sensors online. Weapons online. All systems nominal.
Hey everyone, Carrie here, and this is the last video, or podcast entry, or whatever, about Southern Assault 5. And in this one, I'm going to be talking about my time at the Alpha Strike event. So, starting off, it uses the same rules as every year has for the past 4, with minor variations for Southern Assault. The quick and dirty version is that you get 375 points. Choose a faction and era, you get 1 out of faction unit from the same era and no experimental units. Also, I have to apologize if you hear any weird noises. I have taken in a new cat. His name is Logan, and right now is apparently Zoomy time at 9:45. So, go figure. So, with that, I want to look at what I brought this year, and also, of course, talk about the games played, the good, the bad, the weird, and fun that I encountered. So, let's start off looking at the list for Unicorn Company. This year, I chose to go with a list that is once again built for the mid-range game and started off with a Battlemaster C3. This is a mid to short range machine with a good amount of armor and structure that can throw out 7 at short, 6 at medium, and 2 at long. We then have its friend, the Warhammer 2C11, which does 7 at short and medium and is even scarier. These were my slow-moving anchor units. I had 2 other mechs as the hammer, if you will, the Ryokan K, which does 6 at short and medium with 2 at long, and my salvage unit, a linebacker D with 7 at short and medium. These could both move 12, and that was important. All of the mechs in my list were skill 3. I had 2 squads of Dragoon battle armor, which would be riding the 2 Omni mechs to allow them to ferry battle armor onto the objectives, as well as 2 squads of Fa-Shi battle armor. The Fa-Shi were the plasma variety, and as their deadly taxicabs, I chose a pair of SM-1B tank destroyers, which are pretty scary in their own right. The vehicles, Fa-Shi and 1 squad of Dragoon battle armor were skill 4, with the other squad of Dragoon battle armor being skill 5. And I did mention that it was important that those mechs move 12 inches. The reason for that is a lot of the scenarios allow you to deploy at 8, and because you can deploy at 8, move 12, then deploy for another half movement, you can generally reach the edge of the objective in the center of a table, or on that center line, in 1 turn with a 12-inch movement Omni-Mech and battle armor that can move 6 inches, normally with jumping. So, just something to keep in mind. Alright, now with the force being set, let's hop into round 1. Round 1 was fight, which has always been the first scenario at Southern Assault. My opponent was Sean, who brought I think, Clan Snowraven list. In his list, he had a Hammerhead at skill 4, a Corvus 2 at skill 3, a Cauldronborn F at skill 3, a Loki Mark II C at skill 3, a Hellion E at skill 4, an Axle Heavy Tank 2C at skill 3, a Hachiman AAA Fire Support Tank at skill 3, an Opponent E at skill 4, and 2 squads of Plasma Black Wolf battle armor, 1 at skill 3 and 1 at skill 4. So, in this game, we were pretty evenly matched. It was a desert board, and I think one of the few I have pictures of. In fact, it's the only one I have pictures of, having looked through my camera roll at this point. The wind farm, you can see in the middle of the table, became the focus of the game as we treated it like a patch of woods, and being the only soft cover on the table, it would play a key role in the fight. We finally ended up with 1 unit each, my linebacker, which had somehow gone almost unscathed through the entire game, and his Cauldronborn with 1 armor and 4 structure left. So we settled it like any good shootout in a Western, and I stood to one side and he stood to the other slightly behind a building, and we opened up on each other. In the end, the linebacker had finished off the Cauldronborn in 1 salvo. Technically, because of how points are scored in this mission, this ended up being a draw, but in a game which was so hard fought, I took it as a win in my book. Round 2 took me to a city board where I fought against my round 2 opponent, Brad, from the Mobile Headquarters podcast for the classic 5 objective scenario. Usually we don't see this one until day 2, but we take them as they come. And this one is, well, interesting on a city board where so much is hidden from sight. Brad brought I believe, Republic of the Sphere list. His list consisted of an Atlas 3 AS7D3 at skill 3, a Dolier OD at skill 4, a Madcap Mark II at skill 3, a Marauder 9D at skill 3, 2 cavalry attack helicopters, infiltrator version, skill 6, 2 sniper PAB-28 squads at skill 3, 2 LRM carriers at skill 4, an Arrow 4 carrier at skill 4, and a Sprint Scout helicopter interdictor model at skill 4. So, overall, this was a pretty good game, and while I don't remember exactly how it played out, I think we ended up with either a draw or he pulled off a slight victory. I do recall, though, that the Atlas III was integral to holding his right flank, and that PAB suits were incredibly effective at pushing me off of my left flank objective while we were fighting over the middle. We did have one small disagreement about ranges where something was very close, but otherwise it was a good game with a few interesting moments, like when his home objective on his right flank became something of a dog pile. Overall, it was a good game. The scenario itself is pretty solid, and as usual, it further fueled my hatred of onboard artillery. So, hopping from round 2 to round 3, we have the classic 3 objectives game. This is a classic with 3 objectives equidistant across the center line of the table, and is pretty much a mainstay in all of tabletop wargaming. I played against Brian for this one, and it was a game which I have to say was slightly complicated by the table setup, and a bad matchup on my end. So Brian had brought a Quick Draw 9G at skill 4, a Greyhound SA4 at skill 4, a Blacklander C at skill 4, a Havoc P6 at skill 4, 2 J. Edgar light hover tanks, machine gun variant at skill 5, 2 Balak Strike VTOL hybrids at skill 4, 2 Karnov UR battle armor stealth transports at skill 4, 2 small laser Fenrir battle armor at skill 3, and 2 Fenrir 2 anti-infantry battle armor at skill 4. So, as far as the tactical assessment of this game, it was pretty much a small nightmare with a river running right down the middle of the table between the two of us. And to be fair, not really a lot of cover on my side of the river, which left me out in the open trying to support units which were trying to hold objectives. It also complicated matters as there was no cover near any of the objectives, making it a shooting gallery where his higher TMM units could dart between objectives, giving him an advantage and giving him the match. I do want to put a pin in this one, though, as Brian was running the absolute maximum number of units that you can run in a tournament or close to it, and I feel like there are a couple things I want to address here, but we'll wait till later on that one. After round 3, I was holding it 2 losses and a tie, I believe. I think. Though at least one of those were very close, and at this point, some of the vendors were already set up. Tabletop Terrain had a table set up where you could pay through an honor system using PayPal, and there was also 888stl.cc who had their wares out. Tabletop Terrain has terrain and dropships from Hardware Studios. 888STLCC had a bunch of terrain, including a number of dropships and spoofs of restaurants that give a feeling of urban sprawl to your table, with restaurants that parody Waffle House, In-N-Out Burger, and Arby's. And I found out they actually have more on their website. I recommend checking both of them out, but especially 888STL. They're a local business for me based out of the Hampton Roads region, and they sponsor a lot of events in the community, including Southern Assault, the Battle of the Bay, the Trash Panda Open, and I'm definitely going to be asking them if they'll help support Eastern Assault this year. Oh, and they have ships. Big-ass ships. from destroyers all the way up to a fucking aircraft carrier, and I will be damned if that carrier does not bring back memories of the USS Flag playset from G.I. Joe. Like, it is awesome. One of the display boards actually had one that they had won last year, and they were using it for that. It was just, it's beautiful. Anyway, getting back to the tournament, on day 2, we began with a scenario that is new to me, but has apparently seen the rounds in some other events called Oh, the Chaos of It All. This is an interesting scenario as it has 6 objectives in a hexagon, which are the bestagons, with with 2 on the center line, across the table, and 2 on each player's side. The objectives are numbered 1 through 6. Each turn, each player rolls a d6, and the numbered objective you roll scores you 2 points if you're holding it, and you get 1 point for holding any other objectives. My opponent for this game was Zach, and he brought a Ghost Bear force that consisted of a Kodiak 2-2, Karu B, Nightgyre E, Vixen, Gladiator E, Loki Mark II C, and Blackhawk E. The Kodiak is skill 2, everything else in the list being skill 4. Our map was moderately wooded, with the only elevation being a hill in the middle of the table. Each of our home objectives were wooded, and the 2 on the center line were out in the open. We kept rolling our own side objectives as the bonus objectives, and neither of us really committed to moving up the table as we were both scoring pretty decent points. We finally started moving on each other's forces when the bonus objectives started moving around. I believe I took a loss on this one, and if I could make any suggestions for the scenario to make it a bit more interactive, I would add a rule that doesn't allow a player to have the same objective be the bonus objective on the next turn. So basically, if you would roll the objective that was your bonus objective on the previous turn, you have to re-roll until a different objective would be rolled. Overall, I had a good time and enjoyed the scenario, with the only caveat being that the bonus objective staying in the same place for each of us most of the game did take away some of the incentive to move on those center objectives. Game 5 was against Lucas with his Free Worlds League list, and the scenario is Breakthrough. This scenario is essentially an attempt to get your forces across the center of the table while preventing your opponent from doing the same. Lucas brought a list consisting of a Battlemaster 6C, Carronade 7M, Eris 2N, Blade 7R, Giuliano 5A, Anvil 3R, Whitworth 2H, and Hammer 3C. The Battlemaster and Carronade were both skill 2, and everything else was skill 3. So the map and a bad list matchup sort of conspired against Lucas here. Most of his forces put out around like 3 to 4 damage each and are all good all-rounders with firepower at every range, but couldn't utilize it due to the terrain. So when I say that, the board had various light cover around the table, but it was dominated by an almost unbroken L-shaped bit of terrain, which ran up the center line of the board from my side, and it turned to the right about 3/4 of the way up the board, with a break near the end and a break in the middle there, creating an avenue that I could move up towards the center of the board safely by like sprinting and then just walking normally after that. My force, which is designed more around getting in close and brawling, was able to move up the table at a sprint on that first turn, and it allowed me to send the Warhammer 2C and Battlemaster to my left out of that opening midfield, while my other forces went up the table while he regrouped from having deployed his forces completely across the table to try to run up his right flank. And I was able to cut him off, leading me to pulling off a decisive win in the game, as I essentially caught him at a pincer movement. Lucas would get his revenge in the final round of the Classic tournament the next day, as mentioned in my Classic tournament coverage, though. My last game of the event was against Patrick, who had brought a Magistracy of Canopus force, and we were playing the Extraction scenario, which is more well known as Karnov Down. If you're unfamiliar with this one, there are 2 down VTOL markers 12 inches from each side edge of the center line, with 2 survivor tokens within an inch of the downed aircraft, 1 towards each player's edge. So 4 total infantry tokens or survivor tokens and 2 aircraft. Patrick's force consisted of a Warhammer 2C8 at skill 3, a Thunder 1L at skill 4, an Avatar J at skill 3, a Flea 21 at skill 4, an Ontos Heavy Tank Chemical variant at skill 4, a Shrek AC Carrier Lothian variant at skill 4, 2 Light Fusion Engine Harassers at skill 4, an Engineering Vehicle Flamer variant at skill 4, and 2 squads of Fashi Plasma Support Battle Armor, 1 at skill 3 and 1 at skill 4. So in this scenario, Patrick had things from the jump as he was able to get his units on all 4 infantry squads in 1 turn and have them off the table on turn 2 despite my attempt to dislodge them. At this point, the game was pretty much his. So I decided to do the next best thing. Hold the 2 downed aircraft and wipe out Patrick's force. While I didn't succeed in wiping him out, we had a good game and we were pretty much playing for fun at this point. In the end, I ended up holding 1 of the downed aircraft and we managed to ravage each other's forces. Patrick was an absolute blast to play against and had one of the best display boards at the entire event. I believe I finished in the bottom third of the field, which is fine because at this point I go more to see people I know and have a good time. I mean, there are people I get to see like once a year for the most part, and it's really nice being able to reconnect with friends at the convention, and also just to nerd out and you know, like I don't know how to explain it. It's an experience and it's wonderful. Also, this is the only opportunity I have to play 6 games of Alpha Strike in 1 day. Now, as far as Southern Assault, this is the last year that I plan on playing Alpha Strike in the tournament. And it comes down to a few factors. Part of it is my own doing, as after I won the second year, I've been chasing another win, and that does drain some of the enjoyment in general. There's also the factor of an increased competitiveness that I've seen in the tournament. This is things like the proliferation of heat, and some things have become almost like must-haves, such as the Balak Hybrid Strike VTOL. When you combine this with an increased amount of NPE because of a bit of more win at all costs attitude from some players, I've become a bit disillusioned and need to take some kind of break so I don't end up just not liking the event. As far as solutions, I mean, there are some. A cap in heat or a number of VTOL units allowed in the list would likely be the most soft of a change. More extreme things like limiting it to a certain era or banning certain units would probably be too heavy-handed. As far as an era cap, though, it isn't horrible, like as an idea. At least not, it's at least not banning units, as when I played at the Battle of the Bay, it was limited to the Blakist era, and I feel like there was a lot of variation and creativity in armies that everyone fielded because of that limitation. You couldn't pick and choose an era that gave you the best things for your faction. You had to work with what you had. And I think that was really awesome. Overall, I still had a good time and enjoyed myself in spite of a couple games where my opponent and I had disagreements, or where my opponent took forever to move their forces each turn because they had taken almost the max number of units, but pre-measured every possible movement. I would still recommend going to the event and, in fact, encourage it. At this point, I would say make sure you bring a list which is conforming to the current meta, as a fluffy bunny or mid-tier list is just going to have a rough time and might lead to a less enjoyable experience for someone. So that pretty much concludes everything. Before I finish up, though, I want to mention I will be playing at the Trash Panda Open in April, running the Eastern Assault Tournament at the Richmond Open in May, and plan on being at the Battle of the Bay when that comes around for year 2 as well. I think they did it that last year or this year in like June or July. So I'm pretty much going to be doing something every month as far as events. So that's everything. Until next time, stay safe out there, Mech Warriors. This is Carrie, signing off. I want to thank all of our patrons channel members, and our sponsor for supporting the channel. Our patrons, first we have Captain Sarah, then our lieutenants Boy in a Box and Nathan. We then have our sergeants BZ Archer, Faz, and Steven. Then our cadets Dominic, NB Kaiju, Housemaster Poding, Jamie, and Scott. Then we have our wonderful channel member Miss J. And finally, our sponsor and Mercenary Review and Bonding Commission liaison, Fortress Miniatures and Games.